Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CBDC Forum. And this is the second CBDC Forum that we organized in 2020. And as in the last forum that we organized on September 8th, we have around 200 folks who registered for the event. And during the forum that we also announced we changed the CBDC working group to CBDC committee, and where that's the committee started working with the partners on several very exciting initiatives. And quickly that I just go through a little bit of the initiative, and then we can just jump into the first discussion. And for the CBDC forum, that we aim to be the bridge between the central banks and also innovators, and try to use this to just foster collaboration and dialogue. And our next one will be on November 17th, and it's already open for registration. And it will be a whole day event. And here on the website, and later I will just share the website, on the chat link, and you feel free to just check this out. And we have schedules and everything here. So for the second panel, that's we really focus on the research and development on CBDC, and we have some amazing speakers who line up here. And we have Douglas, and who is a professor in Hong Kong University. And also just, I read your paper, and it's awesome paper. And we have Sam, who is from Coinstreet. And yeah, not only that, he has been working on blockchain related project for long, but just lately that he launched a very powerful and important initiative for security token offering he can share with us. And then we have Marcelo, and who is the lawyer from Central Bank of Brazil. And we will learn a lot about what's happening there. And so last but not least, that we also have Michael Sun, and who is a professor from Fudan University, and also the CEO of Carbon Blue. And he has been leading quite a number of blockchain related initiative. And I think this is also a good opportunity for us to learn and what BSN and other initiative that he's working on. And without further ado, and probably that's start from Douglas, and now the floor is yours.
Thanks, Xiaochen, and enjoyed the first panel and looking forward to our discussion today. You kind of asked me to talk about some research initiatives, and I think one thing that came out of the previous panel is just how many different issues the evolution of CBDCs raises. And if we think about it, I'm sort of coming from a background of focusing on financial sector development, looking at technology and infrastructure, and looking at the way one can use technology from the standpoint of supporting financial sector development and evolution. And if we think about technology in financial services, obviously finance, technology have been co-developmental throughout the history of settled civilizations over the past 1,000 years or so. But it's dramatically accelerated in the past 30, 40 years. Processes, as Michelle was highlighting, of digitization, datafication, most recently tokenization, which have really set questions. And I think how my colleagues and I increasingly categorize this is when we look at the three big themes for finance in the 2020s. It's technology, it's sustainability, and it's a tension between globalization and fragmentation. And when I talk about technology, I think the interesting piece here is that increasingly technology is not the major constraint. In other words, what we're seeing increasingly is that the technology is there to do most things that we want in the financial services sector. The question is really from a policy standpoint, whether or not this is a good idea. And so I think the first aspect when we're talking about CBDCs is really from the standpoint of a revolution that is taking place in the technologies that underlie money and payment systems. And was previously highlighted, it's not just about decentralized technologies, but certainly the advent of Bitcoin, the evolution of DLT blockchain technologies, these highlighted, I think, new technologies and new developments, but very much on the centralized structure. And you know, the Chinese example, if we look at Singles Day and the vast numbers of payments transactions that take place on November 11 each year, shows the potential of centralized systems. And I think it's really, when we're looking at the technology, we're looking at different directions. So one, the technologies. Second, really from the standpoint of geopolitics. In other words, think about what really drove this. If we look at DCEP in China or most other central banks, they've been looking at the possibility of using new technologies in monetary and payment systems for quite some time. Why? Because when we're looking at infrastructure underlying the financial system, payment systems, RTGS systems, these things, they are technological systems. And as a result, they have lifespans. And at the end of the lifespan of any sort of technological infrastructure, it needs to be replaced. And so logically, you would expect a process which central banks go through of analyzing new technologies in the context of thinking about replacements. And so that had been going on. But it was really the launch or the announcement of Libra in mid-2019 that changed the dynamics of discussions. The BIS, of course, released at the beginning of 2018 a study of central banks showing a lot looking at blockchain and central bank digital currency projects, but nothing really serious. Beginning of 2020, pre-COVID, but post-Libra, that survey showed a very different dynamic from central banks around the world. And it's been explicit in the context of both DCEP in the context of China, as well as more recently, the European Central Bank's discussions, its release of the new digital euro document. Explicit in both of those is a reaction to potential competition from non-sovereign alternatives, particularly private sector potential competitors like Libra. And I think we have to admit that Libra, from the standpoint of monetary technology, there's sort of the world before Libra and after Libra. And it doesn't matter whatsoever whether Libra ever launches. Simply the idea of Libra has had this transformational impact on the way that central banks in particular look at things. But in many ways, it's taken COVID-19. And I think something that we've seen is the impact of COVID-19 on digitalization, on payments. And it's really been COVID-19 that took to take DCEP from a proposal to pilots. It was COVID-19 that's taken really sort of academic discussions about the digital dollar in the United States to move to solid proposals and actual studies from the Federal Reserve. And I think that has really highlighted the usefulness, the importance of mechanisms to get money very quickly across the entire population, and how, certainly in the United States, those have been absent. And many other countries around the world are looking at similar ideas, and that is driving discussions further of central bank digital currencies. And I think if we think about central bank digital currencies, you have the policy aspects. There are many different policy reasons why different countries are looking at these. Second, the technological structures. The technology is there to do centralized systems of accounts for every individual in a country. That has certain disadvantages, it has certain advantages. There are similar issues around decentralized structures and things in between, legal, regulatory issues, and certainly political issues. And certainly one aspect of China's move towards DCEP is an explicit recognition of challenges coming from reliance on the US dollar and the US dollar financial system. Ironically, this was highlighted as one of the major reasons why the European Central Bank is looking at a digital euro as well. And certainly if we look at digital dollar proposals, one of the reasons those are moving forward, if we want to take the Atlantic Council project, is exactly geopolitical issues, questions around protecting the status of the US dollar in international finance. So we want to look at this from a standpoint of a research agenda. We can think of it from the standpoint of traditional financial sector issues. Central bank digital currencies from the standpoint of central banks have been tremendously exciting because monetary economists haven't had anything to talk about for a couple of decades. And central bank digital currencies are giving central bank monetary economists something to argue about rather viciously, actually. We can think about it from the standpoint of technology and a variety of different sorts of technological approaches. We can think of it from the business standpoint, some of the things that were highlighted by Richard in particular in the last panel. We can think of it from the geopolitics angle as competition between different systems. And I think the key difference that we're seeing now is that it's no longer just a theoretical discussion. We're seeing an increasing range of countries who are piloting actual systems. And if we want to talk about something like a global stablecoin like Libra, where Libra may have been brought under control from the standpoint of the major economies, from the standpoint of developing countries, currency substitution for Libra still remains a very real possibility from the standpoint of much of the developing world. And so when we think about different countries, you have your sort of three major economies, China, EU, US. What those do from the standpoint of digital currencies matter for everyone else. From the standpoint of other developed countries, projects like those in Canada or Sweden, it's all about cashless sorts of questions, but also worries about what happens if you're Canada and the US develops a digital dollar. What happens if you're the UK and the EU develops a digital euro? From the standpoint of the international financial centers, the UK, Singapore, Hong Kong in particular, very concerned about node roles. This means that we're not looking at retail so much, we're really interested in transferability and interoperability, in interconnections, particularly at the wholesale level. And from the standpoint of developing countries, very different perspectives between a developing country like a Myanmar or Cambodia, where you don't really have much of a functioning banking or payment system. Looking at a system like that, where you could think of a centralized account-based system, has a lot more attraction than in a place like China or the US, where you have developed, highly developed payment systems and a functional banking system. And so I think we're looking at a lot of really interesting issues from the standpoint of research, and the implications of these are moving from academic to real. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Arner, and I think this is awesome. And you touch upon several very interesting issues. One is the evolution story, and without COVID-19, without Libra, and we probably will not be able to have this discussion today because you know, there are not much cases out there. If you know, without some external push. And of course, internally, it's also important, as what you mentioned. There has not been much innovation for the, you know, monetary policy and the new tools which are available for central banks to just have innovation to just issue money or to just carry out monetary policy in a different way. So this is just as exciting as it is, and also coming from internal. And you also set up several very interesting research agenda where that now our CBDC committee also mobilize a lot of Fintech4Good fellows started to just working on different, and I'd be happy to later have a discussion with you on that. And now let's move to the second speaker, and Sam, and yeah, feel free to just continue the conversation. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Sam Lee. I'm very nice to be here. It's such a great pleasure. Thank you for Xiaoqing for inviting me. So I'm not from a government background or from a central bank, right? I'm more sharing from the view of a traditional capital market and financial sectors. I think digital currency. Central bank currency is great, right? But the thing is, like, how do we use it in a commercial world, right? That's the biggest concern, right? Is it going to be exactly the same, right? Because electronic money is not exactly new, right? We actually have a lot of electronic money around the world, and moving to a central bank digital currency, what is the added advantage from a commercial point of view, right? And then what is the interchangeable, right? Interoperability, right? Those are very important. And what are the advantage? I agree with one of the earlier speakers saying that, like, central bank currency doesn't necessarily need to be on the blockchain. But if it is not on the blockchain, if it is just centralized, just like before, like the electronic currency, what's the advantage, right? I think that having a decentralized infrastructure is really bringing a lot of advantage and creating the difference and the added value, right, between the new generation of central bank currency, right? So we would like to see more actually implementation towards the decentralized architecture direction, right? And thank you for Xiaoqing for bringing it up. We recently, if you don't mind, I like to share one of the initiatives we're doing. So we recently, if you don't mind, I will share 2 slides, maybe 3. Okay. Coinstreet, we are an award-winning global decentralized investment bank and also a professional fintech and digital asset consulting firm. Our focus is to manage the interchangeable and the integration between the traditional financial system and the decentralized financial system, right? How do we bridge between the traditional financial world and the decentralized financial world? Many people talk about tokenization, but often overlook about the tokenization, right? So we have to be interchangeable, right? So this is also the key I try to bring out for the central bank digital currency. How do we change it back and forth, right? So recently we launched a global initiative. It's called the TARTS Awards. We are, of course, just one of the co-organizers. We co-organize with a lot of other different organizations as well. So TARTS Award, TADS, is stand for Tokenized Asset and Digitized Securities. This is the world's first annual international award for this space. Of course, there are many fintech awards out there, but this one is very focused just for tokenized asset and digitized securities. The background is, because now the whole tokenization and asset tokenization, digitized security is growing very fast. We want to work with other industrial leaders, hopefully try to create more best practice and in some ways setting measuring standard of what is a high quality tokenized asset and digitized securities. As strategic partners, we're working together to bring out this award. Apart from some of the bigger names, there from the technology side, there's also a traditional investment bank. For example, Westpark Capital is out of LA. Somni Capital is one of the top 10 investment bank in Hong Kong as well. OSL is the first digital asset license trading platform, got the first license in Hong Kong, and of course Crypto Valley from Switzerland as well. We also got Morningstar from Chicago and other organizations as well. This is the steering committee. I'm not going to go into the details. If you go to our website, tasaward.org, you will find all the details. So what I want to highlight is in this awards, altogether, we have 10 awards in 2 categories. First category is what we call the best of class TAS, right? Tokenized asset, digitized securities. Basically, is different types of tokens, right? Equity-backed token, asset-backed tokens, tokenized debt, income-based token, and ESG and SDG tokens. And these are all security tokens, fully compliant securities. These are not, we're not talking about utility tokens or DeFi tokens. Is fully compliant security tokens. On the other hand, the second category, what we call ecosystem excellency. So these are the awards we aim for the solution provider along the value chain of asset tokenization, such as a KYC compliance solution, tokens issuing platform, digital custodian, security token exchange, and digital. So hopefully we can cover both the financial and the technology side of the ecosystem. And because there are 2 very different categories, we also have different sets of judging criteria, right? For, of course, judging the left-hand side, the securities, and right-hand side, a vertical technical solution. So they are being judged differently. So to wrap up, this is the timeline. We actually right at the middle of nomination. Again, thank you very much for Xiaojing for giving this opportunity for me to share with all of you. The nomination period will run until November 3rd, and then we will have a ceremony online. Right? We originally planned to host a big gala award dinner, but not possible under COVID. So we will film the ceremony in Hong Kong, and then we'll broadcast globally and announce the winner at the same time. So yes, this is the ceremony. We will be broadcast on November 18th during Hong Kong Blockchain Week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. And yeah, this is very interesting because as digital assets is very new, and so does CBDC. And as I shared earlier today, that's we are also launch a CBDC award, and I think to learn from Sam how he organized the TAS, and also how TAS can help to just establish industry best practice and guide the investment to just jump into a new field. And we want to learn from this and also prepare for the CBDC award that we launch next year. Thank you, Sam. And now let's move.
Thank you. Yeah, we're
yeah, thank you. And now let's move.
Thank you. We're very pleased to support that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, let's move to the next speaker, Marcelo.
Hi, Xiaoshen. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. I will share my screen. Just a sec. Okay. Okay, great. Let me start with the usual disclaimer. The views and opinions in this presentation are mine and And especially the bad ones are not necessarily those of the Central Bank of Brazil. So now let's talk CBDC. The increased interest in CBDCs has led to a surge in ideas and research about the topic, as Douglas mentioned. So much so that it's all but impossible to keep up with what's being published lately. All this information brings a welcome diversity of perspectives to the debate, but it also makes it more difficult to focus on the fundamental aspects of CBDC. When it comes to designing a CBDC, the distinction between direct and indirect CBDCs is a case in point. Oh, okay. In simple terms, direct CBDC would make it possible for everybody from big banks to informal workers to deposit their money with the central bank. It would be like having a central bank checking account for basic payment services, receiving, holding, spending, and transferring money. This direct model tends to raise concerns though. In times of crisis, people could move their money from banks to the central bank, creating bank runs that would make the crisis worse. Even in normal times, if a significant amount of bank deposits moved to the central bank, banks would lose a cheap source of funding and might even have trouble providing as much credit as demanded. This situation, in turn, could hamper economic growth. Other critics will say that payment services directly offered by the central bank can only be as good as the services provided by the Department of Motor Vehicles. To those outside the US, I can tell you, this is not a compliment. And these critics will add that a direct CBDC would also kill payments innovation, as government institutions are not known for being ingenious. So to avoid displacing banks and stifling innovation, central bankers and scholars have been exploring models of indirect CBDC. Take, for example, the so-called two-tiered CBDC. In this model, CBDC is issued to regulated and supervised institutions, which then distribute the CBDC to the public. But as Sam commented, don't we already have that? Most dollars circulating in the economy are digital and made available through regulated intermediaries, the balances from bank accounts that we use to make payments and transfers. Indirect CBDCs are thus far from a tempting option. Most models of indirect CBDCs are not offering anything new. Some should not even be considered CBDC. It seems that we are trying to find a recipe for making a monetary omelette without breaking eggs. So let's take a step back here. Note that the question about direct and indirect CBDCs is in fact a question about balance sheets. It's all about defining whether the digital money you own is an entry in the central bank's balance sheet, or whether it appears in the balance sheet of an intermediary. Balance sheets are for digital money what safes and vaults are for banknotes and coins. A place where you can put your money to keep it safeguarded. Today, only banks and some selected financial institutions can park their spare money in the huge vaults and balance sheet of the central bank. For the rest of us, the typical option is to keep our money in the vaults and balance sheets of commercial banks. Why does this difference matter? Because the balance sheet of the central bank is the only one that never runs dry. If our digital money is deposited with the central bank, we know that apart from political unrest or rampant inflation, we'll always be able to save, spend, or transfer our money with minimal risks. Can't we then, based on this view, can't we find a way to preserve the benefits of a direct CBDC while reducing its downsides? I believe we can. A good example is the platform model proposed by the Bank of England earlier this year. In this model, you still find intermediaries between the central bank and the public. However, these intermediaries are not offering a balance sheet to hold people's digital money. They provide instead technological tools to help any person or business connect with the central bank and access the digital money kept there. In short, the platform model combines indirect connection to the central bank with direct access to the central bank balance sheet and the CBDCs. This type of CBDC could promote innovation and boost public-private collaboration in the monetary system. The central bank would continue to be responsible for the monetary infrastructure, making the payment system work and setting money accounts for everyone, not just banks. A feature, by the way, that would make the distinction between wholesale and retail CBDC redundant. It would be the same CBDC for all. More than that, the central bank would have to ensure that this infrastructure is not only safe and resilient, but also neutral and open, allowing different types of software known as application program interfaces, the APIs, to access the payment system's data and functionality. Okay, so with the back end in the hands of the central bank, private parties from banks to fintech and big tech firms would take care of the front end of the customer relations. These private parties could offer all kinds of APIs and interfaces and interface platforms to help persons and businesses plug into their central bank accounts and use the CBDCs from their cell phones, computers, or other devices. Does that sound far-fetched? Well, this technology already exists and is being used in jurisdictions that have adopted the initiative known as open banking, from Europe and the UK to Australia and soon Brazil. Under open banking rules, banks have to share, usually through APIs, customer information with other providers of payments and financial services if the customer so chooses. Any central bank could opt for this technological arrangement to start issuing CBDC soon enough, an initiative that could be called open central banking. But how would this platform model affect credit creation? If banks lost much of their deposits to the central bank, they would have to find other sources of CBDC to fund lending operations. That is why banks under the platform model should be able to borrow CBDC from the central bank against a broader range of collateral and for longer periods. The additional CBDC liquidity would provide banks with stable and inexpensive funding that could be used to meet the demand for credit in the economy. So my message here today is this: let us not dismiss direct CBDCs too quickly. If properly designed, they may well be the most promising option for a CBDC, if not the only one that can bring real change to the monetary system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marcelo. And again, very interesting and exciting. And that's, you definitely bring this central bank perspective into this. And I think that's critical. And by the end of the day, it's called a central bank digital currency. And where that's, we need to understand where central bank stand for and also what are the concerns and where that we can just go from here. And of course, when you implement CBDC and other blockchain technology, and you need, different type of infrastructure. And I'd like to now invite Michael, and yeah, floor is yours.
Hi, Xiaochen. Can everybody see me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think there's a very interesting evolution in what's happened in CBDCs, right? I think there's often quoted thing is BIS has said that 80% of central banks are now actively engaged in that. We've already heard about the catalyst moment with the Libra really changing the tone and tenor of how central banks look at the future of money and their place and role within it. And then we're looking at China's new digital RMB, which I think Richard and some of the other speakers have talked quite competently about the scaled test beds that's being deployed in the mainland and the imminent launch of the digital RMB probably sometime next year before the Olympics. And so I think there is a very interesting question to be said, which is basically if we look, not right now, right, but we look maybe 3 to 5 years out, and we look at the landscape, I think it's pretty clear now, given the trends, that this is not just going to be a case where there's just going to be China and the US and the Euro and that kind of thing, duking it out. It's going to be a much more diverse ecosystem. In that diverse ecosystem, there could be at that point dozens, if not more, central banks issuing their own CBDCs. And in the mix will also be a lot of private sector, what we call stable coins and other sort of digital assets that serve the role of functional money. Maybe Libra will be one of those at that time. And so we're going to have this huge ecosystem of different products and different payment methods, and some will be centralized and some will be completely decentralized, and all sorts of variety and innovation in that space. Now, when that happens, then the question is, how will these different elements interact? How will the CBDs be able to be exchanged, traded, and settled? And what are the regulatory concerns and compliance concerns? It's a very difficult question to answer, okay? But I think in general, it brings up the immediate need to have a discussion on CBDC, stablecoin, digital asset interoperability, right? And so I think if you look at the world now, right, it is in this sort of centralized kind of system. And these centralized systems, have pretty well regulated rules on how they interoperate with each other and who they let into their ecosystems. And that's okay if the world is dominated by one or two major centralized systems, and that's the way that the international monetary system works today. But again, if you fast forward, 3 to 5 years, and at that point, there are major economies that have their own CBDCs, and the technology allows for interaction bilaterally or in a direct fashion that doesn't go through the pre-existing centralized system, then what should happen, right? And so I think this is a very interesting research topic. Certainly we are looking at this research topic from our standpoint at the Fudan Fanhai Fintech Research Center, where I reside, but also very practical in the sense that this really is the evolving international ecosystem for the world, right? And I believe that I personally have an angle on this in terms of how that will look, right? And we can look at maybe analogies that had happened in the past, right? So if you looked at, for example, another completely different market, right? The market of shipping, right? And transport, and bulk transport. And you look at what happened, there was a defining moment in that industry when a concept called containerization happened, okay? Where before it wasn't very standard, and it was, they had other ways of doing things. But once you standardized it, you containerized it, and and then you created the ecosystem based around that, then it really changed the whole entire landscape, right? The costs went down 20x. the time a shipment went down 5x, and you know, the world of transport has never been the same. Shipping transport has never been the same. So that concept of containerization and standardization, and the allowing of you know, sort of third-party ecosystems to come out and take a part of that ecosystem, that is that innovation landscape that I think should happen within also the digitization of money. Okay, and what's the equivalent technological notion of containerization? That is tokenization, right? So I think the idea here is we have this brand new technology, which now allows you to take anything of value and attach it to a digital asset, okay, a token, right? And that token then has a lot of nice characteristics. It can be much more fungible than the non-tokenized version. It can actually be exchanged across potentially different ecosystems that we've already figured out how to take a blockchain from like Ethereum and then do a what we call an atomic swap to a blockchain like Tezos and have that token transfer so that someone with a wallet and the Ethereum network can now transfer to another ecosystem. So we have these basic technological tools that allow you to do that kind of thing, right? And so I think that will start to look like the interoperability that's necessary to really drive the future of money and CBDCs and stablecoin interoperability, right? And so if we're looking at the interoperability space, who are the players, right? We have, you know, when we're talking about blockchain systems, we have two major players that have been existing from before. One is called Polkadot, one is called Cosmos. Again, the idea here is that they're the glue logic that connects from one blockchain to the other. On the China side, there was recently announced a blockchain interoperability framework called the Blockchain-Based Service Network, the BSN, which on the China side is very interesting because of essentially the China effect, right? You know, basically since it's launched in April, it's has become essentially one of the top enterprise blockchain ecosystems in the world. You know, it's very highly scaled into the ecosystem in China, and because of that scale, it will also form the sort of backbone of the digital Silk Road to connect this interoperability to much of the developing world, right? And so if we already have essentially the background infrastructure to allow tokenization to really thrive, right? And so now we can put together the pieces, right? We can have, you know, any form of CBDC, whether or not it's a completely centralized version, like the Chinese version is a centralized version. It's a two-layer hierarchical structure. I think it's pretty well designed in the sense that it's meant to be flexible. That first layer is a completely centralized, you know, wholesale kind of system to distribute the DCEP, the digital RMB, to the banks. But there's a second tier where the banks can disseminate that through Alipay or through all sorts of other methodologies, and that second tier could potentially be a blockchain system, right? So they have a well thought out system that will allow the central bank still to have a control over the monetary system and the supply of the DCEP, but also connect internationally to anything else, right? And then we have other systems, you know, central banks, there's a plethora of experimentation. The first experiments in sort of using blockchain and for CBDC design probably all centered around Ethereum, because that was the predominant system a number of years ago. The second generation CBDC experiments sort of extended beyond that. Ethereum might have limitations on, you know, scalability, stability, and, you know, some of the concerns for a CBDC platform. And so now the second generation CBDCs are looking at, you know, things like Hyperledger, Corda, or new blockchains like Tezos or Algorand. And so there's this evolution of CBDCs as they come in sophistication, but at any rate, they all live on different systems. And again, in order for a CBDC to be useful, it needs to interoperate. If you want it to be money, you need to have fungibility, you need to have to transfer that money. And so interoperability becomes a key. So I think that's what it's really about, is the digitization form of money through tokenization, and what are those standards, right? I think this is one of the probably the main hot areas that will be coming up is that interoperability. What is that standard? We have the Interwork Alliance, IWA, looking at standards for smart contracts and digital assets. We have all sorts of digital standards, coming up. Even the EU and other places have looked at that. Those standards are going to be important. The final aspect I'd like to maybe just mention, okay, is also from the standpoint of compliance and regulation, of course, right? If we're going to have this new brave new world, how will the existing monetary system segue into this new world? Well, we still need to have regulation and compliance. Recently there has been a new requirement by the FATF called the travel rule, right? The idea here is that you need to know who, you have to send, payment recipient and receipt transmitter information so that there can be some modicum of traceability so that we can do compliance type things, right? It's not quite clear how this travel rule is going to be implemented in this new world, right? But what I can say is that fortunately, technology is also there to help, right? One of the aspects of digitized money that is not really talked about too much these days by central banks, but I think will be a very, very powerful tool in the future is its programmability, right? The first versions of CBDCs and stablecoins have been simple things. It's just been taking a fiat, digitizing it into a token, or digitizing it itself, or maybe tokenizing it, and then having that be the main product, right? But with that digitization and with smart contract technology, you have the optionality to now program any arbitrarily complex logic into the money itself, into the token. For example, if there's a travel rule, I mean, in theory, you could program metadata into the token that collects information about where the money has been along its route as it's being passed around, right? Also, I think there's very interesting experiments and dialogue about whether or not you can actually have digitized forms of CBDCs which have interest rates built into them, i.e., it has a timer in it that will actually give you accrued extra value within the CBDC system over time. And so there are very interesting implications on the sort of monetary policy that can result from that. In fact, we were writing papers on that as well. There are other aspects that are very interesting as well. You can actually go and arbitrarily program, the use of those tokens and where they can be used or redeemed. So this is very pertinent now post-COVID. There's a $2 trillion stimulus in the US, and it's based off of this theory that you give this major stimulus to the banks, and the banks somehow disseminate that money to the people in need to stimulate the economy. Okay, in actuality, that transfer mechanism from the banks to society doesn't happen that well. What the banks usually do is they keep it, right? And they do stock buybacks with it, right? And they do things that are not in the benefit of the original stimulus, rationale. Well, now with programmable money, in theory, a central bank can make it explicit that this money can't go for stock buybacks. It's got to be used for these type of purchases, things like that. So that fine-grained ability to control fiscal policy is, I think, another set of regulatory tools that is potentially very powerful for central banks that right now have not been fully explored. Now, certainly, this is these type of things are very innovative, but also they have to be well thought out. I mean, I don't think a central bank or a government should be releasing programmable money of arbitrary forms the same way that the DeFi movement has latched on to innovation in finance. But I think there's a hybrid situation, right? I think we can take learnings from the DeFi world. For example, the idea that you can take a non-fungible asset and stake it, and then have yield come off of it, right? I mean, another way of saying that in sort of traditional finance terms is it's a bond, right? You give money in, you lock it in, and you get some sort of interest rate from it, and then you get the principal back at some point. You know, there's all sorts of very interesting innovation in the space. It'd be very interesting to see how we can take innovation from the crypto space and apply it to the new institutional space. We saw that happen in the first forms of tokenization when we had the sort of wild west of ICOs, but now we have a regulated form, STOs and things like that. It only took a few years before the world caught up, the institutional world caught up and regulated that. Likewise, things in the DeFi world, I see that being a pattern as well. So we can take the learnings from the wild west of what's happening in the DeFi world now, apply it into institutional setting now, and see where that goes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I think again, this is a very helpful. And I think you know it's great that you are the last speaker of this panel. And you know we were discussing CBDC and DeFi, and you were able to just bring the CBDC and DeFi together and see what CBDC can potentially leverage the DeFi innovation and the infrastructure which has been built. And I think this is really very interesting. And now that's I would like to just invite Christine, and you can just ask your question.
Thank you, Xiaochen. I would like to ask Professor Douglas Arner or any speakers who have a view on this, your view on the impact of DCEP, which is China's CBDC. Would the use of DCEP affect SWIFT and US dollar dominance? Thank you.
I think it's interesting, and I'll talk both about DCEP, but also the digital euro discussions, because oddly enough, it's the digital euro discussions that are much more explicit about this sort of issue than actually the DCEP discussions. If we look at DCEP in its initial form, it's largely going to be domestically limited, which means that from the standpoint of sort of alternative, it doesn't really work. But what it does do is it builds potentially an environment whereby transactions can take place, at least in the Chinese environment, but eventually with Chinese partners, which would take place, as Michael suggested, without the need for an international currency. And so the answer is not initially, but definitely that the geopolitical relationship between the US and China has definitely accelerated some of the progression here. It's interesting because in the digital euro report from last week, the European Central Bank was rather explicit about this in saying that one of the reasons they were looking at a potential digital euro was to reduce risks of essentially being forced or over-reliance on other currencies.
Thank you, Professor Arner. And any other who want to just jump into this question as well?
Yeah, I will comment, right? Again, leading off of, where this future vision, right? Again, if we're looking 3 to 5 years out, and we're looking at a world where there's, maybe dozens of CBDCs issued into the wild, and also competing stable coins like Libra playing its role. What does that international monetary system look like, right? I think, if you look at the U.S. Dominated international monetary system, that's a 75-year-old system, right? It's from Bretton Woods. I was actually at the 75-year anniversary at Bretton Woods. That's a long time for any technological system as David had mentioned, to be in existence, right? And so certainly the technologies due for update, certainly the new technologies that exist, in terms of this brave new world of blockchain and decentralization, allow people to have alternatives to the existing monetary system. So it's my notion that that there has to be change. Now, that being said, I think of course, in this geopolitical climate, this is being pitched as, will the dominance of the hegemony of the US dollar be overshadowed by the digital RMB, things like this, which is quite sensationalist. That's going to take a long time, as also David mentioned, short of China deciding to open up its capital accounts, which is a very, I would say, complex decision to have. Internationalization of the RMB will have a limit, right? But again, we're going to have the digital euro. We're going to have the digital, kroner. We're going to have the digital franc, Swiss franc, right? And in that world, there's going to be a lot more complex interaction. I think in the end, it's going to end up in a positive place, meaning in the future, if you look at what the international monetary system should be, it should probably be more multipolar than it is now, right? Because we have, other economies that matter. And so in that world, of course, the US and the US dollar will still have a very important and maybe even a dominating role, but maybe not a complete role that it has today. And I think that evolution is probably a good thing. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see, Marcelo, that yeah.
Yes. No, I would just add two quick things. First, we have to take into account that international trade already happens with digital money. People are sending dollars or euros or renminbis. It's all digital in the international trade sphere. It's not that importers and exporters are sending loads of banknotes and coins. So it's not really the digital aspect of the currency. And here I'm agreeing with Michael. It's not really the digital representation, the digital format of the money that will change the dynamic in international trade. And the second point, as long as most international trade is denominated in US dollars, it's very hard for any other national or sovereign currency to try to surpass the predominance of the US dollar. So it's interesting, and that's, as Douglas said, that's a concern for the European Central Bank, because if even in the euro area they have to make international trade using dollars, that may be a problem, and they are trying to address that with the digital euro. So, but just these two comments.
Thank you. And now I'd like to have Marcelo to ask your question.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to share a comment. Sorry, I was mute before. I'm trying to say something.
Got it. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I'll be quicker. I think this question from Christine is really interesting about like DC, CBDC, but particularly for China, right? DECP. In China, because the renminbi, well, going to the back to the earlier point, is about the transformation and the value added and the incremental change, right? For a lot of the more popular Western currency, they already freely circulate, right? But we think about renminbi is not an international freely circulated currency. So what Michael bring up about the international of renminbi, I think that will be a very interesting aspect of DCEP. And on the other hand, also on the settlement side, right? Because now, like, go back to the issue of the, China-US issue, right? Now we know the world is based on the SWIFT system, which is very much US dollar dominant, right? So if we pushing forward to a different settlement system on a decentralized format, right, then the DCEP become very interesting, right? So there a lot of room Chinese can play around with DCEP, right? Which will create a lot more incremental and value added than any other traditional like Western currency. That's my view.
Thank you. Yeah, and now Marcelo, and please ask your question.
Okay. Thanks everyone for sharing this insightful information and research. My question is about the role of cash in existing together with CBDC in the future. Just I'm curious, is replacing the cash completely a preferred or a necessary result for the future money world? So so I guess the question is more about what's the vision of central banks for CBDC in the future. I know in the first panel, both Michelle and Richard mentioned that probably cash will coexist with CBDC for a while. And just is this in the end, or overall, what's the vision, what's the preferred, or what's the plan for CBDC in the future in terms of the relation with cash? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And before others jump in, and I just want to mention, interesting conversation I had with the Central Bank of Japan. And I think the answer to that question is really, country by country, and it's very different. And the number one, thing came to my mind was, the behavioral change of the preference of each individual. And the Central Bank of Japan colleague just shared with me that, Japanese love Japanese yen. And so because of the love, because of that preference, and it's very hard for another form of currency to dominate. But in other countries, they may not just love their cash that much. So that the adoption will just take a very different role. But of course, I want to also hear others' opinion on that.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it really well. You have some countries that have an objective to eliminate cash, but very few. Most are anticipating some sort of multi-monetary instrument model in the same way that we already have it today. There are only a few countries that I think that are looking at eventually a sort of single digital monetary instrument. And it's interesting, like the Japanese, the Germans have a very strong preference for cash. And also in terms of even digital units, there are very different social preferences in terms of privacy, fungibility, etc., that go into design features.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, Tom.
Hey, good afternoon. Yes, Tom Meredith here with a trusted agent. We've been active in Kenya for many years, and I believe Kenya is a great model to have a standard that transacts across multiple platforms, primarily phones, of course, where the developing world is the primary target. Jane Meredith. And the idea there is that you can basically create, in essence, a digital currency without even necessarily having central bank approval. You just need a quorum. So, for instance, I believe you've got well over 50% of all transactions in Kenya are conducted over M-Pesa, and it's cashless. I've used it myself, and it works great.
Thank you. Yeah, and so we already 7 minutes overdue, and we also have another panel at 1:30. And I already shared the link of the next panel. Will use a different link. This will not be the same link. So if you want to join the next panel, feel free to just click that link, and then we'll start from 1:30. And so yeah, for that panel, that will have the discussion mainly on the country studies, and we have several great speakers there as well. And before we end this dialogue this morning, and I want to just say thank you very much everyone for joining us, and of course thanks to our speakers. And our next CBDC forum will be on November 17th, and it will be a whole day event. For the first half of the day, that we'll host a few conversations like this, but mostly with a country or regional focus. So each session that we focus on one region or one country. So then we try to just get the case study to be more prominent in the debate, in the conversation. And in the other half day, that we are going to do CBDC training or the first test delivery of our course. As you can see, from the site, from the academy, that we have 8 courses out there. And so the first course that we are going to test will be the CBDC an introduction course, and we'll offer 15 scholarship to central banks and also private sector from developing country. Then the rest will just be available for participants from other countries. And altogether for the pilot, we'll have 30 people in the course, and you're welcome to join us. And of course, the second one I also want to mention is, today we talk a lot about the research and also capacity around that, and we see many interesting research topics emerge from the conversation. And we'll just we'll come back to both the speaker and some of you from the audience side, that's to brainstorm on several research agenda that we have already prepared. And we have a book which we are preparing to be completed next year. And we'll welcome contributors from this group and who want to just join us for one chapter or for multiple chapters, etc. And then for the initiative that I mentioned as well for CBDC, and if you want to just be included in the initiative as the expert roster or in the the learning board, and welcome to contact us. And so this, as many speakers or other speakers share the same, that this is the beginning of something great. And we are part of the conversation. The reason, although it's called central bank digital currency, it's not a business only for central bank, it's for everyone. And the reason, I think you already heard from all the speakers. And when you have from the design side, you need the technology expert from different background. And when the CBDC is being launched, and you need also to tap into all the existing ecosystem out there, and how the business is done here, and how to just convert that into a CBDC environment. And I think a lot more topic need to be covered. So this is again very exciting topic, and I'm looking forward to just continue the conversation. And we welcome everyone to join our future CBDC events and initiative. And thank you again. And hopefully that we'll see some of you in our panel today at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good